My project was on social work burnout and understanding for future research. What I wanted to do was go through and find out why there was evidence and confirmation of recognition for birth. Social work being a field in which burnout is a more than average likely chance of happening. However, through my research, I've discovered that it has changed over the years, and we've had more development into research. Investigation through literature shows that there are many factors that contribute to burnout development. And although there's a tried and true method, the Maslach burnout inventory, there's disagreement when it comes to the subscales division and factors when measured to better understand burnout. And I wanted to explore the factors that come into play, the way in which burnout has been measured throughout time, and ways in which to manage and reduce burnout so that there could be a future benefit when it comes to research. Again, this is through extensive literature research and investigation through my own agency communication. So as I said, contrary, there are many factors that can contribute to burnout and its development, but there's no universal way besides the Maslach burnout inventory. There needs to be more research to explore the different variables and factors like organizational and personal, and the impact that they have on burnout development and ways in which to prevent and manage it. But one of the initial factors to look at when it comes to risk factors and indicators is the profession itself. Because those who come into this position, they can encounter negative events, which then impact many aspects of their lives. So burnout in and of itself is difficult to address. As of 1982, there were at least 30 different definitions of burnout, one being a process in which a previously committed professional disengaged from his or her work in response to stress and strain experienced on the job. And burnout isn't the only term to carry over. And other terms that come hand in hand with it is stress and stressors, indicators of burnout development in terms when describing burnout in general. And like many studies have shown, burnout is considered a syndrome with dimensions of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced feelings of personal accomplishments, the key dimensions included in the Maslach burnout inventory when measuring. Some studies show risk factors that the analyzation of organizational and social variables can be a potential predictor of burnout. So like role conflict, role stress, stressful events, and the such can be used to show a strong association when it comes to emotional exhaustion. Other factors would be high emotional demands, which result from interactions with clients, can be key characteristics of service jobs. And most of the time, emotional demands are seldom directly measured, but the multidimensional concept when it comes to emotion work can be used to analyze relation of the variables and their combined effect when it comes to burnout. So one article shows a view in which 6 different scales exist to measure burnout. The most used would be the Maslach burnout inventory, the MBI. There's 22 items which are divided into 3 subscales. And they're written in a form of statements of feelings or attitudes and compared to the normative scales for each subscale. There are also reports of 2, 4, and 5 factor solutions. And there is evidence that shows an increased scale complexity, and items being loaded to more than a single factor can be omitted from responses, but there is limitations when it comes to changing the way in which burnout is measured. But again, the most commonly used one is the 3-dimensional scale, which usually is included to be along a single item self-report burnout measure to assess the area like personal trauma, personal characteristics, workload, work experience, and occupational environment. And this specific study resulted in a current burnout rate of 39% and a lifetime rate of 75. That's pretty high. And this is the example of what the burnout scale is. So what's developed that there are studies that challenge the 3-dimensional structure, while others also explore additional factors behind it, like discrepancy between work expectations and job reality, and workload management to burnout development. There are also suggestions to prevent burnout that has appeared with research. So like improving staff communications, agency structure policy. However, all of these are suggestions to prevent, while prevention can also come down to the individual worker and how they work. So there are different factors that exist, which comes to a worker's ability to cope with the aspects and demands of the field. So suggestions are highly great, but it's also up to the individual worker on whether or not they work. So key factors include empathy and compassion, satisfaction, emotional regulation, positive regard and self-awareness, and coping strategies, engaged and disengaged coping. Engaged, where one's efforts to actively manage their stressors through problem solving. Disengaged, where one efforts to manage stressors through avoidant tactics. It depends on the individual person on which way they cope. Another way is to work on ways in which to address workload management. Different stages from implementation of workload management systems can be identified, like planning, analysis, and development, and also improving staff communications as well. Moving forward, we need to be able to accurately identify burnout, and it's critical to develop interventions to lower the impact on workers. For future study, the indication of different aspects of work organization could relate to burnout, and the idea of like the demand control support models is another way in which to address burnout. And it is important to look into the different areas of the concern along with burnout, such as secondary traumatic stress and emotional contagion. Implication-wise, it does affect social justice because as the worker experienced burnout, not only is the worker affected, but the client and organization is as well. And it can negatively impact the way in which services are rendered. If a state of mind is impacted, it can result in difficulty when it comes to processing emotional material from a client. Practice-wise, the practice can be affected as well. As worker experience negative impacts on burnout, there's also a negative impact on clients who receive services. Evidence was found to support that evidence-based practices reduced burnout and compassion fatigue while increasing compassion and satisfaction. So understanding burnout and how to prevent it can assist in keeping a balance between the worker's well-being and the quality of services to client in practice. And diversity-wise, it is important to keep in mind that workers tend to engage in contact with those who have experienced trauma. Mental health conditions, physical or developmental disabilities can develop from different backgrounds. Due to how diverse social work is, exploration of burnout and how it is addressed in the varying fields is important because all populations are affected with the development of burnout. And so exploring into burnout and social work has been explored, but there needs to be more exploration when it comes to the factors and indicators and the ways in which to address it. Like one of the main side effects is heavy turnover in the field, which leads to increased burnout for those who remain. And then these are all additional information and sites that have done research into social work burnout.